Okay, good evening, and thanks for joining us. My name is Kyle Doyle. I'm the Manager of Asset Management at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. Today we're talking about the Langdale Wastewater Service and the 2020 Capital Funding Update. Joining us today on the line, we have the Utility Operations Manager of Utility Services, Shane Walkie. We have Darren Joseph, who's the Asset Coordinator, and we have Director Hiltz, the Area Director for Director F. Just want to do a quick little bit of housekeeping. We're hosting this meeting today virtually over Zoom, as well as webcasting over YouTube. The meeting will be recorded. If you participate in the meeting, you will be recorded and put on YouTube. So just so your heads up. Because some of us are on Zoom, we'll have different features. If you'd like to participate via Zoom, during the meeting, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a little question and answer button. If you click on that and type a message, our staff will see it during the meeting, myself excluded, and they'll try to answer your questions as best as possible. If we can't get to them during the meeting, we'll get to them at the end of the meeting. And just to make sure everyone has fair access to the questions, I will be reading them out loud so that the audience on YouTube can participate as well. At some point in this meeting, we might put up a poll asking for your opinions. The poll is not binding, but it just allows us to get a measure of the residents' feedback in a different manner. And then finally, like all Zoom meetings, you can raise your hand and we'll let you have an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting when there's time for questions. If you type into the chat feature, there's a good chance we'll miss it. We have in the past just because of the volume of the chat and the way it cycles through so quickly. So that's not the best way to get hold of us. Either the question and the answer or the raising the hand would be preferred. Okay, now we've got that out of the way, I'm just going to fire up this presentation here. Oh, should add that one back to the start. Okay, as I said earlier, this is the wastewater treatment 2020 capital funding update for Area F, Langdale Wastewater Service. The map on your screen in front of you is the wastewater service area that's under discussion today. At the top of the screen, the Langdale Wastewater Service abuts with the YMCA Wastewater Service. The main boundary for the service is defined on the screen though. If you're not in the service, you're welcome to join us, but please keep the questions to the Langdale Wastewater Service for this evening. Thanks. Just a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about today. We'll do a summary of what we discussed in our previous engagement sessions, the review that was conducted over the last couple of years. We'll go over a capital funding update for the Langdale Wastewater Service. We'll talk about what's coming up next, and we'll take questions at the end. So the wastewater service review was conducted. It started in 2019, and that was a high-level review of wastewater services within the SCRD. That was followed up by a more specific series of asset management plans for every single service. This put together all the information about the wastewater service in one place and allowed for us to conduct our preliminary life cycle and operational cost analysis. Once that was completed, we went out and engaged with the community. We hosted a series of information sessions across the Sunshine Coast to share the findings of our asset management plans and our service review and to gather feedback from residents. We produced a series of fact sheets to allow the residents to see the information visually that we were trying to convey. And then we prepared a budget revision on the feedback that we got from the residents, and we presented that to the board, which resulted in a rate adjustment where some user rates and some frontage fees were adjusted in 2020 to reflect the updated budget information. Some of the key findings from the 2019 wastewater service review was that the existing revenue for wastewater services was unsustainable. The operations budget was found to be often greater than the revenues generated from user fees. And this meant that contributions to reserve funds were frequently deferred. It boiled down to the fact that future capital expenditures were not planned for, and the ratio of capital reserves to the future capital expenses was too low. This was presented in the engagement sessions, but just a little recap. We previously collected frontage fees from every parcel in the service area and user fees for every parcel that was connected to the wastewater service in the service area. These were combined to create the operating budget, which was used to fund the annual expenditures, and it was used to contribute to the capital and operating reserves. A summary of our previous review's outcomes were that we decoupled the user fee and the frontage fee. So going forward, user fee revenue only funds operation and maintenance activities, and the frontage fee only funds capital expenses. After an extensive review of the operation and maintenance requirements was conducted, we audited the operation and maintenance activities, and we revised the operation and maintenance budget to ensure adequate funding was available for the operation and maintenance activities. We established an operation and maintenance reserve minimum target to make sure that there was always money available to do the work that needed to be done to maintain the service. This process is an annual process, so we will continue to review the operations and maintenance budget on an annual basis and revise the funding requirements as needed. We also developed a capital funding model to plan for future capital expenses. So this is just a look at what we consider a sustainable long-term funding model. In this model, user fees are collected to pay for operations and maintenance budget, which then contributes to the operation and maintenance reserve. And frontage fees are used to fund capital expenditures and fund the capital reserve. A common question we encountered during our engagement sessions and the feedback from the residents afterwards was, why do we need an operating reserve? Two important things is that unforeseen repairs can exceed the annual operating budget, and we're not allowed to borrow for operational expenses, and so there has to be some sort of reserve there to account for these unforeseen expenses. It is important to note that operating reserves are withdrawn and used only for your service area. Your reserves do not fund other wastewater service areas or other services on the Sunshine Coast or anywhere else. So again, just a summary of what came out of the last review. This was the impact on the wastewater rates for the Langdale wastewater service. After an operation and maintenance budget increase of 44%, we saw the user fee increase from $562.50 a year to $924.98 a year. There were no other changes to the revenues for Langdale wastewater service. So going forward, we're looking at the capital funding side of things, and we listened to the feedback we got during the engagement sessions. We were told we were too conservative, so we went through the information we had with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb. We analyzed historical SCRD contract data to allow us to refine the long-term capital model, and this allowed us to reduce the engineering allowance estimates by 3% and reduce contingency on future projects by 15%. We also heard there was a larger tolerance for debt than we felt originally, and we considered financing larger portions of projects in our models. And finally, we heard that the uncertainty of future rate increases was causing undue stress on the residents, and so we're proposing a 5-year rate structure to allow for short-term certainty and what's coming up for the user rates, their frontage fees for these systems. We also updated the savings and borrowing rates to match current rates. We introduced a variable borrowing rate based on the expected term of the loan for the future infrastructure. And we applied a variable construction cost index to better reflect construction inflation over time. This information was built from RS Means data on historical construction inflation. So just a quick review. Some factors that were were key in making these capital models is that the overlying principle that the provincial legislation dictates that local service areas and regional districts can be funded only by participants. This restricts who we can seek to generate revenue from to pay for the services. Costs are shared by a small number of people. All infrastructure degrades over time. As we install new infrastructure frequently, we tend to forget that down the line it'll need to be replaced. And infrastructure costs inflate over time. So the price we pay today for infrastructure is going to be less than the price we pay in the future. So some of the basics that we used when we're building these models, we developed a timeline of the anticipated replacement using estimated useful lives of infrastructure. These were from our historical data and from engineering best practices. We used the most recent replacement cost estimates where possible. If there was a similar sized treatment plant or piece of infrastructure that we replaced, we tried to use the most recent costs to avoid unnecessary inflationary effects. We inflated to the anticipated replacement date using the construction cost indexes that you saw before. And we included debt financing costs to make sure we captured the cost of borrowing money for future work. And where we developed revenue or anticipated the reserves being built up, we applied the annual interest that would be accrued from those savings. This is a key point. As I said earlier, just to avoid any unnecessary inflationary effects, using more recent replacement costs allow us to dial in the estimates a little bit more accurately. And a quick refresher that the three main components in a wastewater service are the treatment plant with a 50-year lifespan, the disposal system with a 40-year lifespan, and the collection system with about an 80-year lifespan. So when the main components have such long expected lives, it's important that we capture the right horizon of time when we're planning to replace this. So I'm just going to give you a little walkthrough of a Goldilocks scenario, a little bit too cold, too hot, and just right. If we look at the next 30 years of anticipated capital expenditures for Langdale, we can see that we have a treatment plant and a drain field come up in 2024, and we have a collection system coming up near the end in 2050. Now, that doesn't seem like so bad. But when we consider that the historical rate increase for the Langdale wastewater service has been 22 cents a year, what that means is the reserves we've been able to build up or will be able to build up by the time it's time to replace the treatment plant are quite low. And so the result of that is that when we get to the frontage fee in 2024, there's a spike of over $1,360 due to the loan payment that will be due at that time. These sort of spikes are not ideal when you're thinking about capital planning, as it creates like hot potato situations, people trying to pass off responsibility perhaps for paying for new infrastructure. And if we back that up to a 50-year time frame, we can see we capture a few more items near the end of the horizon. And we apply the same historical frontage fee, and we can see that in 2065, another spike, nearly $2,000, can be anticipated. So we'd like to aim for something where the rate increases at the same rate as the value of money decreases, and that's called inflation. So 2% increase per year is our target. Ideally, that would be a flat rate, basically, over time. Now, if we back up this window even further, we start capturing some pretty large expenditures. This 75-year range is too long. There's more uncertainty in cost and technology, and we feel that 50 years is the right horizon to focus on to ensure that there's adequate funding for our service. So this is the first plan. I think this was one we presented last year at our engagement session. It might be slightly altered, but with lower contingencies and stuff. But we look at raising the rate $200 a year for the next 4 years. and that goes from $102 presently to $902. Obviously, we don't have a treatment plant design. There's no construction plan. So until we have that, we don't know exactly when the construction will be. But assuming that we do construct the plant and the disposal field in 2024, there would be a $417 increase from the $902 in 2024 to the $1,319 in 2025. From there, we would increase from 2% on an annual basis. This was one of the plans with minimal debt. And what I've done here is I've added the reserve balance to the screen. And you can see that blue line is sufficient to pay for the upcoming infrastructure replacements throughout the 50-year plan. There's a little bit of a hint in 2071 of the anticipated capital expenditure coming up there. And you can see that the reserve into that year is less than a third of that anticipated expense, but that's outside the window at this time. So we looked at maybe slowing down the increase for the next 4 years. So from 2020 to 2024 in our plan number 2, we look at $100 a year increase, at which point in 2024 to 2025, there would be an $891 increase that's debt driven, and a 2% increase after that. Again, this plan also has minimal debt. One of the factors with when we're planning Langdale infrastructure replacement and these capital costs, it is a pretty near term future that we'll need to do work. And so because we haven't developed a very large reserve at this point, it's going to be difficult to, in the near term, develop anything significant. However, you can see the increase from 2024 to 2025 is much greater than the first option. The reserve balance under this scenario is still sufficient for all the upcoming capital debt. So going on to plan number 3 here. This would be the slowest increase for the next few years, from 2020 to 2024. We look at $50 a year increase. And then so instead of an $800 increase from 2024 to 2025, it is a $1,128 increase. And then from there, a 2% annual increase. And in this scenario, when we look at the reserve balance across that time frame, we see that we do need to incur some debt for work in the mid 2060s, but otherwise it is similar. This is sufficient reserves to pay for all the upcoming debt, all the upcoming expenditures, I should say. Now, we thought Langdale might be a scenario where a grant is possible. It's difficult to plan for grants because they are issued by outside bodies and we don't have much control outside of applying for them. But we do know that in the near term, there is a drive to improve infrastructure across Canada and improve wastewater infrastructure in particular. So we'll be seeking grants actively. We thought we'd model just to give an idea of how that would impact your costs and the resultant reserve balances. So this is the first model, but in the 2024 year, we assume that a 30% grant was awarded for the construction cost of that project. And in this scenario, we peak at $902 and we just increase 2% for the next 35 years, 45 years. And we're still able to have reserve balance sufficient for most of the work that needs to be done. Now, we can't plan to receive grants, but we can work to receive them, and we will do that. Now what you have on your screen is just a comparison of the fee schedules for the 3 plans that we discussed. In green, it raises the most quickly to $902, but then it is the lowest after that for the rest of the 50 years. Blue, a little bit less of a quick increase over the next four years, but then it's more expensive than green. And the third one in brown there, as you can see, no short-term pain, but longer term, it's more expensive. So at this point, there's going to be a poll going up on the screen, just asking what the preferences are of the audience for the plans here. Feel free to log your vote. There is no recording of who voted for what. They'll just be passing on numbers to the elected officials as to what the residents felt. I'll just give you a minute for that. Okay, thanks for the feedback, much appreciated. Seems like 100% of respondents preferred plan number 2, which is understandable. So moving on. Should I go password? I discussed earlier a 5-year rate structure. So the proposal that will be taken to the board will include a 5-year structure to create some cost certainty. That's not very much how I drew it up. Sorry, I just lost my phone there. This will allow residents to have a little more rate certainty. It's up to the board to approve or deny this, but we think it aligns with the financial policy that we have here at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. So these would be the 5-year rates for the 3 plans we discussed today. I've included the user fee column there on the far left. It's important to note that the operating budget for which affects the user fee will be reviewed on an annual basis. And if there is any change to the construction of the plant, there could be a reduction or an increase in the operation costs. Operation and maintenance activities will be factored into the deciding what type of design we want to use in the future if we do replace the plant. So the user fee may change. That's one's hard to plan, especially when you have a significant change to the system like a plant in the near future. But the frontage fees are what we're looking at for the next few years. So these would be what we're pushing towards the board when we talk to them next. And that's a sum of the capital funding update. Coming up ahead of us, we're going to finalize these models, make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's. We're going to continue to pursue grant opportunities for future work. We are going ahead with a feasibility study for Langdale, as well as a grant that we've applied for. We should know in the next few weeks if we got the grant for the feasibility study. And that will give us a bit better direction on what exactly the next 5 to 10 year horizon in capital expenditures looks like. And then we'll present the 5-year rate structure for board consideration. And on an ongoing annual basis, we'll review the operations and maintenance budget and refining the projection of maintenance cost and ensuring that the operating reserve is in an adequate situation. So just a quick conclusion. Our current rates are not financially sustainable. They don't account for future infrastructure replacement. There are multiple ways to finance 50-year capital expenditures. The 4 we demonstrated tonight were just among many that we worked on. When we have that near-term capital work, within 5 years and not many reserves to work with, it doesn't present us a lot of options that look differently. But we sliced the cake as many ways as we could, and these 3 we presented today, we feel like they reflect a good variety. And then the annual review that we conduct will maintain up-to-date information, and we'll look to incorporate new estimates and capital costs that we're aware of on similar systems to make sure that we're using the most recent estimates possible. So that's it for my side of the presentation tonight. If you have any questions that don't get answered tonight, you're welcome to email us at info@scrd.ca, or you can go check out the website, scrd.ca/Langdale, or scrd.ca/wastewater will point you into the where we reposit most of the information for the wastewater services in the Sunshine Coast. So at this time, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions or comments. You're welcome to type them in there or raise your hand and share them with us. Or if you'd rather do it on a less public forum, you're welcome to email us and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I don't see any questions. I'm just going to get myself another glass of water here, and if I come back and there's any more, we'll answer them then. Just a reminder to anyone who's viewing this tonight, you're able to see this stream again on the Langdale website. There'll be a link to the YouTube stream. You can find that at www.scrd.ca/Langdale. Okay, we don't seem to be getting much feedback here. Just so that no one has to watch multiple 10 minutes of me sitting here in silence, I'll give it another couple minutes and then I'm going to end the stream. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@scrd.ca. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Kyle Doyle, and it's been a pleasure to have you.